At first glance, Luxembourg shouldn't be one of the richest countries on Earth. It covers just over 2,500 square kilometers, has a population of well under 1 million people, no coastline, no significant natural resources, and no military capable of projecting global influence. Surrounded by France, Germany, and Belgium, it appears to be just another small European nation overshadowed by far larger neighbors. Yet appearances can be deceiving. Today, Luxembourg consistently ranks among the wealthiest countries in the world. It manages trillions of euros in investment assets, hosts hundreds of international financial institutions, and serves as one of Europe's most important financial centers. Every day, hundreds of thousands of commuters cross its borders to work in an economy that has become vastly larger than its size would ever suggest. Most people assume Luxembourg became rich because of banking. That explanation is only part of the story. The country's success was built over nearly 2 centuries through a series of remarkable reinventions. Whenever one industry began to decline, Luxembourg searched for the next opportunity instead of trying to preserve the past. It transformed itself from an agricultural society into a steel powerhouse, then from an industrial economy into one of the world's leading financial centers. Rather than competing through military power, population, or natural resources, Luxembourg chose a different strategy. It made itself indispensable to international business. That decision changed everything. This is the story of how one of Europe's smallest countries quietly became one of the richest nations on Earth. Chapter 1. A country that shouldn't be rich. For centuries, Luxembourg seemed destined to remain a minor state caught between Europe's great powers. Its location made it strategically valuable, but politically vulnerable. Positioned between France and Germany, the territory repeatedly changed hands throughout history. It was ruled by the Burgundians, the Spanish Habsburgs, the Austrians, revolutionary France under Napoleon, and later, the Dutch. Unlike larger European nations that developed uninterrupted political institutions, Luxembourg spent centuries adapting to foreign rulers. Ironically, that instability became one of its greatest strengths. Living between powerful neighbors taught Luxembourg an important lesson. Survival depended on flexibility rather than domination. The country could never compete through military force or territorial expansion. Instead, it learned to cooperate, negotiate, and adapt whenever Europe's political landscape changed. That philosophy would eventually define its economic future. Modern Luxembourg officially emerged in 1839 after the Treaty of London established the independent Grand Duchy. Although the country had finally secured political recognition, it remained economically fragile. Agriculture dominated the economy, opportunities were limited, and few observers believed the tiny nation had much chance of becoming prosperous. Everything changed beneath the ground. Southern Luxembourg contained significant iron ore deposits within the Minette Basin. During the Industrial Revolution, demand for steel exploded across Europe. Railways, bridges, factories, and expanding cities all required enormous quantities of iron, transforming what had once been an overlooked resource into one of the continent's most valuable commodities. Luxembourg acted quickly. Investment poured into steel production, factories expanded, and employment surged. By the early 20th century, Luxembourg had become one of Europe's leading steel producers relative to its size. Industrial exports fueled economic growth, modernized infrastructure, and dramatically improved living standards. For the first time, Luxembourg possessed an industry capable of competing internationally. But unlike many resource-rich nations, Luxembourg's leaders understood that prosperity built on a single industry rarely lasts forever. Steel prices fluctuate, technologies evolve, new competitors emerge. If Luxembourg wanted lasting prosperity, it would eventually need to reinvent itself once again. That realization proved remarkably forward-thinking. After the Second World War, global steel production expanded rapidly. Countries with larger populations and lower production costs gradually became more competitive, placing increasing pressure on traditional European manufacturers. For Luxembourg, this posed an existential challenge. Remaining dependent on steel meant risking the country's entire economic future. Many governments facing industrial decline attempted to protect old industries through subsidies and trade barriers. Luxembourg chose a different path. Instead of trying to preserve yesterday's economy, it began preparing for tomorrow's. The country already possessed several important advantages. It had stable public institutions, a well-developed infrastructure, an educated workforce, and, perhaps most importantly, a political culture built around international cooperation. As one of the founding members of the European Coal and Steel Community, the organization that eventually evolved into the European Union, Luxembourg had positioned itself at the center of European integration. International institutions increasingly established offices in Luxembourg City, bringing legal expertise, diplomatic influence, and global connections. These developments revealed something important. Luxembourg's greatest asset was never iron ore. It was its ability to adapt faster than larger countries. That willingness to reinvent itself would soon transform the Grand Duchy from an industrial nation into one of the world's most influential financial centers, a transition that would generate far greater wealth than steel ever could. Chapter 2. From Steel to Finance. For decades, steel was the engine of Luxembourg's economy. The industry provided thousands of jobs, generated most of the country's exports, and transformed a rural nation into one of Europe's most prosperous industrial economies. But by the middle of the 20th century, it had become clear that the golden age of European steel would not last forever. Countries such as Japan, South Korea, and later China began producing steel at lower costs and on a much larger scale. Global competition intensified, prices fell, and profit margins shrank. Across Europe, former industrial regions struggled with unemployment and economic decline as factories closed. Luxembourg faced the same threat. The difference was that its leaders refused to wait for a crisis before taking action. Instead of trying to preserve a fading industry, they began searching for the next source of long-term prosperity. Decades of industrial success had left the country with strong public finances, reliable infrastructure, and a well-educated workforce. Even more valuable was Luxembourg's growing role within Europe. As one of the founding members of the European Coal and Steel Community, and later the European Economic Community, it had become deeply integrated into the continent's political and economic institutions. Luxembourg City was chosen to host several important European organizations, including the European Court of Justice and the European Investment Bank. These institutions attracted lawyers, diplomats, economists, and international professionals, creating an environment that was increasingly connected to global business rather than heavy industry. Recognizing this opportunity, the government adopted a new strategy during the 1960s and 1970s. Instead of competing with larger nations in manufacturing, Luxembourg would compete in international finance. New legislation modernized banking regulations, encouraged foreign investment, and created a stable legal framework for cross-border financial services. Rather than attracting banks through low taxes alone, Luxembourg focused on offering something that global investors valued even more: predictability. Businesses wanted clear laws, efficient administration, political stability, and access to the growing European market. Luxembourg provided all of those advantages in a country known for pragmatic policymaking and international cooperation. The timing could hardly have been better. Globalization was accelerating. International trade expanded rapidly. Multinational corporations grew larger, and investment increasingly crossed national borders. Companies operating across multiple countries needed financial centers capable of handling increasingly complex international transactions. Luxembourg positioned itself as exactly that. Banks from across Europe and beyond established operations in the Grand Duchy, using it as a gateway into the European market. At the same time, the country invested heavily in developing the professional expertise needed to support this transformation. Lawyers specializing in international finance, accountants, auditors, regulators, and investment professionals became essential pillars of the new economy. By the end of the 20th century, Luxembourg had achieved something few industrial nations ever manage. It had successfully replaced its dominant industry before that industry completely collapsed. The country had transformed itself from a steel producer into an international financial center, laying the foundation for an even more remarkable period of economic growth. Chapter 3. Becoming Europe's financial capital. Building a financial sector was only the beginning. To become one of the world's leading financial centers, Luxembourg needed to offer something that even much larger economies could not. Rather than competing directly with London, Paris, Frankfurt, or Zurich, Luxembourg focused on a niche that was becoming increasingly important as Europe integrated its economies: international investment funds. A breakthrough came in 1988 with the introduction of the European Community's UCITS directive. The legislation allowed investment funds approved in one member state to be sold throughout the European market under a common regulatory framework. Luxembourg moved faster than almost anyone else. Its government quickly adapted national laws, creating one of the most attractive regulatory environments for international asset managers. Global investment firms suddenly had an efficient base from which they could access investors across Europe. The response was extraordinary. Companies including BlackRock, Fidelity, JP Morgan Asset Management, UBS, BNP Paribas, Franklin Templeton, and many others established major operations in Luxembourg. While their global headquarters often remained elsewhere, Luxembourg became the legal home for thousands of investment funds serving clients around the world. As more firms arrived, an entire financial ecosystem developed around them. Every investment fund required lawyers, auditors, accountants, compliance officers, custodians, regulators, and technology specialists. Each new institution attracted additional expertise, making the country even more valuable for future investors. This created a powerful network effect. Success attracted more success. Today, Luxembourg hosts one of the largest investment fund industries in the world, managing trillions of euros for pension funds, governments, corporations, insurance companies, and private investors. Although much of that capital is invested overseas, the administration, legal services, and financial management supporting those investments generate enormous economic activity within Luxembourg itself. Equally important was the country's reputation. Investors were not looking only for favorable tax policies. They wanted legal certainty, political stability, experienced regulators, and institutions they could trust over the long term. Luxembourg built that trust carefully over decades. Its multilingual workforce also became a significant competitive advantage. French, German, Luxembourgish, and English are widely used in business, allowing professionals from across Europe to work together with ease. Every day, thousands of specialists from dozens of nationalities manage investments that reach virtually every major economy in the world. By concentrating financial expertise within such a small country, Luxembourg achieved something extraordinary. It became indispensable to international finance, not because it controlled the world's capital, but because it provided the trusted legal and administrative framework through which so much of that capital could move. For a nation that once relied on steel mills and iron ore, it was one of the most remarkable economic transformations in modern history. Chapter 4. The real secret behind Luxembourg's wealth. By this point, it's easy to assume Luxembourg became wealthy simply because it attracted banks. But the country's real success goes much deeper. Banks can move. Tax laws can change. Financial markets rise and fall. Luxembourg understood that lasting prosperity could never depend on a single advantage. Instead, it built an entire economic ecosystem that international businesses would find difficult to replace. At the center of that ecosystem is the investment fund industry. Today, thousands of investment funds are legally based in Luxembourg, collectively managing several trillion euros on behalf of governments, pension funds, insurance companies, corporations, and private investors around the world. While these investments may finance companies in the United States, factories in Germany, renewable energy projects in Europe, or infrastructure across Asia, the legal and administrative work behind those investments often takes place in Luxembourg. Every fund requires lawyers, auditors, accountants, regulators, custodians, compliance officers, and technology specialists. Each of those professionals creates highly skilled jobs that generate significant economic value, despite the country's remarkably small population. The same strategy applies to multinational corporations. Many global companies have established European headquarters, holding companies, or treasury operations in Luxembourg. Contrary to popular belief, they are not drawn only by taxation. What many businesses value even more is certainty. Large corporations make decisions that affect billions of dollars over many years. They need stable governments, predictable laws, efficient regulators, and an independent legal system capable of resolving disputes fairly. Luxembourg built exactly that reputation. Its political stability has become one of its most valuable assets. Unlike many financial centers that experience frequent political uncertainty or major policy shifts, Luxembourg has maintained a consistent economic strategy for decades. Governments have generally focused on long-term competitiveness instead of short-term political gains. That consistency gives international investors confidence. Another remarkable feature of Luxembourg's economy is its workforce. Every weekday, hundreds of thousands of people cross the borders from France, Belgium, and Germany to work in Luxembourg. Banks, law firms, European institutions, insurance companies, and technology businesses all rely on this international labor force. Without these daily commuters, Luxembourg simply could not support an economy of its current size. Its prosperity has become deeply connected with the wider European region, demonstrating that modern economic power is often built through cooperation rather than isolation. The presence of major European institutions strengthens this position even further. Luxembourg hosts the European Court of Justice, the European Investment Bank, and several other important EU institutions. These organizations bring thousands of highly educated professionals into the country while reinforcing Luxembourg's reputation as one of Europe's political and financial centers. Together, finance, international business, European institutions, and professional services create a highly diversified ecosystem where every sector supports the others. That interconnected system is the real foundation of Luxembourg's wealth. But success also creates new challenges. As more international professionals arrived, demand for housing rose much faster than supply. Property prices climbed dramatically, making Luxembourg one of Europe's most expensive real estate markets. Even highly paid professionals increasingly found it difficult to purchase homes within the country. The solution has been cross-border living. Large numbers of workers choose to live in neighboring France, Belgium, or Germany while commuting into Luxembourg every day. Although this has helped businesses continue expanding, it has also placed enormous pressure on transport infrastructure, creating daily congestion on roads and railways. Luxembourg has also faced criticism over its corporate tax system. For years, multinational companies used the country to organize their European operations through highly efficient legal structures. Critics argued that some businesses were paying less tax than they should, leading to international controversy and greater scrutiny. Rather than resisting these reforms, Luxembourg adapted once again. It strengthened transparency, supported international tax cooperation, and aligned many of its regulations with OECD recommendations. While some traditional tax advantages became less significant, investors continued choosing Luxembourg because the country's appeal had never depended on taxation alone. Its greatest strengths remained political stability, legal certainty, experienced professionals, and trusted institutions. Even so, Luxembourg's leaders know they cannot afford to become complacent. Financial technology, artificial intelligence, blockchain, sustainable investing, and digital assets are rapidly changing global finance. Competition from cities such as Dublin, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, Singapore, and Dubai continues to intensify. Instead of resisting these changes, Luxembourg is preparing for them. The country has invested heavily in financial technology, cybersecurity, digital infrastructure, and sustainable finance. It has also expanded into industries such as satellite communications and space technology, demonstrating the same willingness to reinvent itself that transformed it from agriculture to steel and from steel to finance. That ability to evolve may be Luxembourg's greatest competitive advantage. Throughout its history, the country has never assumed that today's success would automatically continue tomorrow. Each generation has recognized changing global trends before they became unavoidable and positioned Luxembourg accordingly. It is this culture of continuous adaptation, not geography, not natural resources, and not low taxes, that explains why one of Europe's smallest nations continues to rank among the richest in the world. Chapter 5. Why Luxembourg's success is so hard to copy. By now, it might seem that Luxembourg has discovered a formula any country could follow: build a strong financial sector, attract international businesses, and prosperity will follow. But if it were that simple, many countries would have already matched Luxembourg's success. The truth is that its greatest advantage has never been low taxes or banking alone. It has been trust. In global finance, trust is everything. Investors managing billions of dollars want more than favorable regulations. They need confidence that laws will remain stable, contracts will be enforced, and governments won't suddenly change the rules. Luxembourg has spent decades building that reputation. Its political stability, independent institutions, and predictable legal system have given international businesses the confidence to invest for the long term. Location has also played a major role. Positioned in the heart of Europe, Luxembourg provides direct access to the European Union's single market, while sitting just hours from major financial centers like Paris, Frankfurt, and Brussels. Combined with a multilingual workforce that comfortably operates across different cultures and legal systems, the country has become an ideal base for companies serving clients throughout Europe. Just as importantly, Luxembourg chose to specialize instead of trying to compete in every industry. It focused on investment funds, wealth management, banking, insurance, and financial services. As these industries expanded, they attracted lawyers, accountants, auditors, technology firms, and compliance specialists, creating an ecosystem where businesses benefited from the expertise already available. The more companies that arrived, the stronger this network became, making Luxembourg increasingly difficult for competitors to replicate. Perhaps the country's greatest strength, however, is its willingness to adapt. Throughout its history, Luxembourg has never assumed that success would last forever. When steel declined, it embraced finance. As technology began reshaping global markets, it invested in financial technology, cybersecurity, digital infrastructure, and sustainable finance. Rather than protecting the past, Luxembourg has consistently prepared for the future. Ultimately, Luxembourg's greatest export is not steel, banking, or investment funds. It is confidence. Confidence that businesses can plan for decades, that institutions will remain reliable, and that the country will continue adapting as the global economy evolves. That is why this tiny nation continues to attract investment from around the world, and why its influence is far greater than its size would ever suggest. Luxembourg's story challenges one of the oldest assumptions in economics, that power belongs only to countries with large populations, vast natural resources, or enormous domestic markets. By every traditional measure, Luxembourg should have struggled. It is one of Europe's smallest nations, surrounded by far larger neighbors, and lacking the natural advantages that helped build many of the world's richest economies. Yet over 2 centuries, it proved that geography does not determine destiny. What mattered far more was the ability to recognize change before everyone else and adapt accordingly. When iron ore created an opportunity, Luxembourg built a world-class steel industry. When steel entered decline, it didn't cling to the past. It reinvented itself around finance. As globalization accelerated, it became a gateway for international investment. And today, as technology and sustainable finance reshape global markets once again, Luxembourg is preparing for the next transformation rather than waiting to be forced into it. That pattern has repeated throughout the country's modern history. Instead of relying on one competitive advantage, Luxembourg has built institutions that inspire confidence. Investors know the rules are clear. Businesses know contracts will be enforced. Financial firms know regulations are predictable. Governments change, global markets fluctuate, and new technologies emerge. But trust remains one of the most valuable assets any financial center can possess. That trust cannot be built overnight. It is the result of decades of political stability, consistent policymaking, and a willingness to think beyond the next election cycle. While many countries compete by lowering taxes or offering short-term incentives, Luxembourg has focused on something far more durable, creating an environment where international businesses feel confident making investments that will last for decades. Its influence now extends far beyond its borders. Every day, investment funds managed through Luxembourg help finance companies, infrastructure projects, renewable energy developments, and innovation across the world. Millions of people have retirement savings, insurance policies, or investment portfolios connected to funds administered in a country that many could barely locate on a map. That is perhaps Luxembourg's greatest achievement. It has become indispensable without ever becoming dominant. It never built the world's largest military. It never controlled vast colonial empires. It never possessed enormous oil fields or massive manufacturing industries. Instead, it quietly positioned itself at the center of international finance, creating value by helping the global economy function more efficiently. Of course, the future is not guaranteed. Competition from other financial centers will continue to grow. Artificial intelligence, blockchain, digital assets, and changing international regulations will reshape finance over the coming decades. Countries such as Singapore, Dublin, Dubai, Frankfurt, and Amsterdam are all competing for the same global investment flows. But if Luxembourg's history teaches us anything, it is that the country rarely waits for change to happen. It prepares for it. That ability to anticipate economic shifts has allowed Luxembourg to survive wars, industrial decline, financial crises, and changing global markets while remaining one of the wealthiest countries in the world. Ultimately, Luxembourg's greatest resource has never been iron ore, banking, or favorable regulations. Its greatest resource has always been adaptability. In a world where industries rise and fall faster than ever before, that may be the most valuable asset any nation can possess. For a country that once seemed destined to remain in the shadow of Europe's great powers, Luxembourg has accomplished something extraordinary. It proved that influence does not always belong to the biggest nations. Sometimes it belongs to those that understand where the world is heading and have the courage to get there first. In many ways, Luxembourg's success is a reminder that the global economy has fundamentally changed. The wealthiest nations of the future may not necessarily be those with the largest territories, the biggest populations, or the greatest natural resources. Instead, they will be the countries capable of attracting talent, building trusted institutions, embracing innovation, and adapting faster than the world around them. Luxembourg understood this shift long before most of its competitors, transforming itself from an industrial economy into a nation whose greatest exports are financial expertise, legal certainty, and institutional confidence. Perhaps that is the most remarkable lesson of Luxembourg's journey. It never tried to become the biggest country in Europe. It focused on becoming one of the most valuable through patience, long-term planning, and an extraordinary willingness to reinvent itself. This tiny Grand Duchy proved that influence is not measured in square kilometers or population figures, but in the role a nation plays within the global economy. And as the world enters a new era shaped by artificial intelligence, digital finance, and rapid technological change, Luxembourg's greatest advantage remains exactly what it has always been: the ability to see the future before everyone else and position itself at the center of it.